First up, I'd like to welcome Lori Rowldson, a Senior Vice President of Strategy and Innovation at BGIS. And Lori is a hands-on thought leader, leading strategic transformation initiatives for key clients on a wide variety of topics, including corporate real estate, employee experience design, cost reduction on small buildings. And she advises C-suite real estate executives on a wide variety of topics to define and drive the best outcomes for their clients. Today, she's here to share her secrets of success to transform the culture of a company to become more innovative and move beyond innovation theater into real, measurable, tangible progress. Really looking forward to this one. Over to you, Lori.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lori Rowlandson, and I'm so delighted to join you here today. We're going to be talking about the new normal, and I wrote a book about informed predictions of how the way we will work is going to change forever. And just talk to you a little bit about different technologies that have really been enablers of a very different way of working. Just do a quick recap backwards before we look forward. So why don't we get started? First of all, just by way of quick introduction, like I said, my name is Lori Rowlandson. I'm the Senior Vice President of Strategy and Innovation for a company called BGIS. We're a small global boutique facilities management company of just under 9,000 employees globally, and just over 400 million square feet under management. And I sponsor the program of innovation, which, as you can appreciate, often crosses over into technology and smart buildings and the way we work and the future. So that's my day job. By night or by part-time, my alter ego is I just really love technology, and I'm a bit of a super nerd. So even in my spare time, I read a lot about technology and emerging trends, and dare to call myself a bit of a futurist, but I really love and look at emerging trends. And because I work with engineers, I try to translate those into practical things that we can do today to move the needle forward in a bigger, more roadmap kind of an approach. So today I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about COVID and the pandemic that happened and the shutdown that happened over the last couple of years, which we're still working through the details. 2020 was kind of a really bizarre year for many of us, and 2021 is still unfolding. And if you could think back, it was only a year ago that there was hoarding and, things were disappearing off the shelves, and it was really kind of a frightening time. But one of the things I started to think about was during severe instances of our human existence, big, disasters or events, whether they've been fire, earthquake, 9/11 security events or pandemic. One of the things I realized is that there were a lot of companies that were born out of adversity. And so I started to think more about that. If you think of, and here on the screen, you'll see a number of companies that were born out of times of adversity. Disney was born in the Great Depression era, and it almost feels like an anachronism in that time. Square and Venmo were developed out of a bit of a backlash against the banking system and the cost of transferring costs. IBM is another one, and they've continued to reinvent themselves from when they started. And even Airbnb and Uber were developed in a situation, it was one of the inaugurations. There was a huge amount of crowds. They were trying to take advantage of all of the Swiss cheese in the infrastructure, whether that be, living accommodations and hotels or driving arrangements. And we're really inspired by times of difficulty or adversity. So it really made me think, with the backdrop of what's been happening in the last 2 years, what kinds of companies are going to be born out of a set of circumstances that we're still sorting ourselves out with, right? So I really started to think about that. While I was thinking about that, in the background, I came across this article that really inspired me. This is a Boy Scout, a real Boy Scout. His name is Quinn. And one of the issues that happened, if you remember, a lot of people were going to the hospital, a lot of healthcare workers were overworked, and they had to wear these masks to be able to work safely and effectively. And they were getting these abrasions from the medical equipment and masks that they were having to wear. So Quinn very considerately decided to research what kind of devices could help protect them. And he owns a 3D printer. So he fired that up. He went on the internet, looked for some sort of a pattern to print, and he printed a bunch of these test cases out. He had a friend in the medical industry. He donated them and tried them out, and they were great. It made me really think about, in a time, it was such an anachronism in the time where we were feeling such constraints in our supply chain. And at the same time, we were having resourceful people come up with ways around that. And one thing I do know about humans is that we are really our best in times of adversity. We really try to find a way to survive. And I was just so impressed with Quinn, as a 12-year-old kid, really contributing and solving a problem. And it made me think about what kinds of challenges we're going to be faced with, not just in 2021 and beyond, as we adjust into whatever the new normal is, and what kinds of technologies and practices will accelerate going forward. So what has COVID done, or this pandemic and the preparedness and the awareness, really done to change the way that we're going to work going forward? So we started to collect a bunch of case studies. Barb, my sister, and I collected a number of examples and published them into a book. This is not a sales call for the book. It's really just to talk about the different case studies. So these are real examples of things that happened over the last 18 months, really, in how people adjusted to dealing with a different way of working. We organized the case studies and observations under 4 categories: real estate impacts, human impacts, technology, and leadership. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about giving you some of those case studies and those examples of real things that we think are going to leave an indelible mark on the way that we will work forever. So here's just a glimpse of a few examples. The first one under the real estate category is around mobility programs. Certainly, this is not a concept that's new to many people. We were working with mobility practices prior to COVID. But if any organizations were ever wondering about what their maximum potential could be for working in a more flexible work environment, 2020 was a living experiment that really held up a mirror and showed companies what their potential could be. So it's really gives you an opportunity to really reevaluate how much space you use and how you actually use it, rather than going back to the way things were. We do know that 63% of our economy is based on knowledge workers in North America. So, which means that a lot of people work in an office environment. And therefore, this is really the demographic that we're talking about, not people that are work in restaurants and things like that have to be on the front line. We also know from that demographic of knowledge workers that 80% of them only want to be in the office 1 to 2 days a week. And this is a very consistent statistic that I've seen over the last 18 months. It doesn't matter what industry, whether it's banking, pharma, telecom, etc. It's the common denominator is the office environment. And so those organizations that have an office component are finding their employees want to come into the office still, but only 1 to 2 days a week. So we're going to see, we expect a lot more rationalization of real estate and probably a much higher mobility or sharing ratio than ever occurred before. So mobility on steroids is another way to say that. I think from that, there's some essential tools that are going to enable the rationalization of space, a data-driven approach for demonstrating that you're a good custodian of real estate assets and all of those expenditures. Obviously, going through the last 24 months, organizations are enduring financial strain. So they're evaluating different ways that they can manage costs. Again, not eliminating the office entirely, but rationalizing the amount of space necessary. So a lot of tools that we're seeing flow to the forefront. If they didn't have them before, you need them now. They're becoming essential tools. There's 3 of them in here. The first one is around space planning and reservation systems. So space planning is really the stacking mobility ratios. So the work setting configurations of how you're set up and the assignment of people to space. And then along with that is reservation systems. So providing a lot more bookable space instead of assigned seating. And then the third technology in here that we see is around utilization tracking. So sensors that not at a desk point and not to check up on individuals, but really just to monitor capacity and see and just understand what kind of real estate setting and assets are required and what are people interested in and how much volume of space people are actually using. So you have a planned idea or a perception. These counters really help identify the actual utilization of space. So measuring actual utilization has gone from an interesting technology to one that's almost a standard or actual to be able to demonstrate that you're using the mobility programs with that are as efficient as possible. All of these are strong enablers of cost reduction, but they're also a big path towards carbon reduction, because obviously the best carbon that you save are the ones that you don't expend. So rationalization of space not only contributes to the reduction of your real estate costs, but also reduces significantly your carbon impact, as well as some of the other benefits to carbon, such as allowing people to work maybe from home or from other areas that don't require traveling in every day. The next one is around death of the office. So I get asked this question a lot. I think the term death of the office is such a salacious term, and it certainly has been over exaggerated, and it's not an all or nothing. I think people are thinking rationalization of the space means eliminate. Absolutely not. But I think that we need to really rethink what the purpose of the office is. If you remember before COVID, one of the biggest complaints about the office was not enough meeting rooms, and it's too much of an interruption environment. So I think we're going to move away from seeing offices as to where you do individual work. It'll be really where you go more to collaborate or innovate and celebrate and do all of those things that involve collaborating with other colleagues. And certainly there's times where it's better to be in person, and certainly times where you want nobody, where you just want that introverted time to really focus on writing a contract or reading or absorbing something. So people need a mix of both, right? So this is not what we're describing. These mobility programs are not a work from home program. It's really around flexibility, choosing where you are the most productive and giving employees more choices and environments to be productive. So we said earlier, 80% of employees want to work in the office 1 to 2 days a week and work somewhere else the rest of the time. So I think we're going to see a lot more of that, but we're going to see people, companies reprogramming the office to have a lot more collaboration area, a lot more meeting space, instead of where you go to do individual work. So, you know, it might have been 80% individual seating before, 20% office or meeting areas. I think you're going to see a switch to, again, just based on our own experience and talking and working with clients, closer to a 50-50, and some are even going more aggressive, that the office is predominantly just for where collaboration happens. You always have that group of people that are anchors that have to work in the office. Again, depending on your industry and business, could be security reasons, could be filing reasons, paper reasons, but generally we're seeing across the board only 10% of people need to be in the office every day, and it's open game for the rest, which means you have a lot of opportunity to reimagine the office for different purposes. Number 4 is we've realized that work is what you do, not where you are, and the definition of workplace and the physical workplace is really changing. Although with COVID, it was a work from home program, we want to think of mobility programs as work from anywhere. We're going to see, I think, a lot more of the hub and spoke model with, you know, having a primary office and then a satellite office, maybe working out of client locations, home offices, of course, co-working locations. One of my favorite places to work when I had to be individual and do heads down work was in a coffee shop like a Starbucks. I love the public anonymity and of course great coffee, and there's always a bit of a buzz, but that's just my personal choice. So I think we have to really assume that the definition of workplace is really going to change. We're seeing restaurants even opening up that normally only open at 4. They're opening up their restaurant to co-working kind of situations. We're seeing people rent Airbnb places for the day to be able to go and touch down. So Tim Ferriss was right. The definition of workplace is really changing. This is going to give us great access to labor arbitrage and people that are located in different time zones, potentially even different countries. So it's really setting us up really nicely for the gig economy and the right tools, both technology and the right HR and management practices to be able to manage an extended team of people that may or may not ever be in the same room at the same time, potentially ever again. The fifth thing that's really been elevated from COVID and the pandemic that we've experienced over the last 18 months is a strong focus on health and wellness. I'm personally really delighted to hear this, and not just physical wellness, but mental wellness. And yes, this did start, I think we were talking a lot more about well buildings prior to COVID, but just as an accelerant for not only health and safety reasons, but physical well-being and mental health. I think a lot of the reasons why we're having so much controversy around the purpose of the office and should we return to the office and what proportion is people are crawling the walls a little bit. Even people that are productive at home just need a change of scenery. And some people don't have great at-home circumstances to be able to work remotely. They don't have that choice, or they're in New York in a small apartment with their roommate. It's not really that conducive to working remote, and it's taken a mental toll. So I'm really delighted that that part of the wellness and well-being has been elevated into our discussion. And it's really been escalated as a topic of concern. Technology has, if you look at the obesity levels in humans over the last 25 years, there's a direct correlation to the amount of technology. And most of our exercise is done this way now with our thumbs. So it's just being mindful to get out of the office, focus on a health regime, both for your body and your mind. And we're seeing a lot of employer health benefits starting to divert towards a really strong focus on those amenities that really feed the body and the mind, and a very strong focus on that. I'm really grateful. There's a number of different building certifications and certain industry standards that are growing in their importance and are really stepped up to address the hybrid work environment. And many of the organizations on this slide I've had a lot of discussions with over the last 6 to 12 months to really understand how they've evolved their program of support, and really proud of how they've embraced the hybrid office and really supporting companies with turnkey tools ready to go. The sixth one I get asked about a lot is how do you measure productivity? And I get asked to weigh in on things like measuring, software that measures keystrokes and the amount of time online. And I am, for the record, dead against those. I don't think that activity is a measure of productivity, but I do think that we do have a gap that has been brewing for a number of years, and that is around the annual performance review, which is an anachronism in today's agile world. We just need something that is a bit more responsive, in shorter bursts, allows for us to reprioritize on the fly very quickly. And I think we do need to invest in HR and some training for our middle management to help them manage better by outcomes. I think we are too wired traditionally to measure productivity by perception, or bums in seats is another way to say that. And it's just not true. Somebody could be shopping for shoes on their phone or doing anything, right? So activity is not productivity. Just because somebody is in the office doesn't mean that they're being productive. So we definitely need the skills and HR training to be able to manage our virtual teams virtually. The other thing I would say is, the other question I ask people that ask me this question is, if you don't have the rate management tools and training, is this sort of a blanket consideration for a trust issue culturally? Is there a bigger issue as a corporate culture, or is it a performance issue of a specific individual that you're trying to blanket? So my advice is deal with the performance issues directly. Really look at the, you've hired people. If they're producing, why don't we trust them to produce what they need to? It could be we don't have the evidence. So then it goes back to the middle management training in our HR, managing by outcomes, not by the amount of time they were online. And if you really want to know what enables employee productivity, ask them. And I've seen a number of best-in-class companies, and you know their names, that survey employees and ask them what amenities they need to be productive, what would make them productive in their work environment. And employees will tell you honestly and directly. And if you trust your employees, if you make good hires, do what they suggest, enable their productivity, but listen to what they have to say and provide for options, because humans are organic creatures. They have good moods and bad moods. There's introverts and extroverts, people early in their career, later in their career. So they all have different needs. They all have a spectrum of needs. One size does not fit all, but ask them, organize it, prioritize it, and deliver on what they want. Number 7 is around continuous learning. So obviously working in a hybrid environment, especially those of you who are earlier in your career, it's really, really important that you take charge of your brand and your mentoring program more now than ever, because you might not see your manager every day. So you have to be very intentional about how you structure your personal development. One of the things you'll see on the side on the right is an article that says 85% of jobs that will exist in 2030 haven't been invented yet. And that a lot of that is driven by technology and the amount of pace and change that we're having in technology. And the same with the number of jobs. I think the same stat carries over to 2035. 85% of the jobs that we'll be doing then haven't been invented yet. So what does that mean for somebody that's early in your career? It means that you have to be a ravenous learner to keep up with your skills. What you're learning today isn't perhaps going to be as relevant 10 to 15 years ago. And if you're longer in your career, remember those computers we had at the beginning, we were learning DOS and the green monochrome flashing cursor. It's like something out of the Matrix. Technology changes very quickly. The iPad just had its 11th birthday. So we forget sometimes how fast technology changes and how much it changes our life. So take charge of your personal development planning. Make sure you have a plan. Find a way to love learning, whether that's audiobooks, reading, watching YouTube. Just find a way to love learning and learn. You're going to have to continuously learn. And then the last thing I'll say about this slide is it's really important to take charge of your influence. I think influence is going to be the new career currency. So that's how many people are following your voice and are interested in your voice, what influence and thumbprint you're leaving on your industry, which is going to speak volumes above any tenure you have in a company. So think a lot about, your LinkedIn contributions and how you're being a good citizen of your industry that you're in and how you're contributing to that publicly as well as within your company. The 8th item is technology, and 5G is going to become an essential utility. It already is in our opinion. And this is going to give way to some acceleration of things like the metaverse. I've got a link to a couple of videos you can see on this slide. And I know this sounds really out there, but it was very interesting to see during COVID how much augmented reality and virtual reality experiences beyond gaming were accelerated. We saw in certain cultures where that handshake was important to do the deal, and you couldn't do that because you couldn't even get on an airplane, let alone anything else, couldn't even shake hands, not even fist bump. So you actually saw contracts signed in virtual reality. So some case studies about that in the book. And I do think that higher quality of virtual reality is going to create a much broader impact on digital experience, especially in retail. I think virtual retail is going to only accelerate. Just a few years ago, we crossed the threshold into more retail is online, a significant portion of it through Amazon, than in person. And I think that the metaverse is going to continue to accelerate that, which is going to create rippling effects in organizations' decision on retail. What kind of a store do you want? Do you want it to be experiential? Do we need it at all if it exists in the virtual world? And then office, if we're engaging and meeting with our colleagues virtually, does that fulfill a certain demographic of need? It will never replace human contact. Come on, let's be real about that. But it adds a very engaging way to do that. And if you've been following Facebook, Facebook is really aiming towards dominating this market. And I've tested some of their technologies there. We can use virtual yellow padding sessions and really fun collaboration with your colleagues and avatars. And, for a brainstorming session, it's quite inspiring. And it's still very new, but I think it's really accelerated over the last couple of years. And we're going to see more of it. I think it's going to become a lot more mainstream by 2025. And it's only, we're in the third quarter of 2021 now. So you can come back to me on that in a couple of years and we can find out if we were right in our predictions. Well, that's all for now. I wanted to just highlight a couple of things that are really impacting how we're working in the future. Just a reminder, work is what you do, not where you go. And the last 2 years has really shown us what our potential is to work a different way. And I don't think we'll ever go to extremes because of the reasons that I mentioned. Humans are different. They have different needs and different work habits, and through their career journey, they have different needs. But I do think that it's going to put a lot of pressure on the way that we work in the traditional physical environment going forward into the future. Well, that's it for now. If you have any questions, I'd love to hear from you. Please connect with me on LinkedIn. Check out my website. I've got tons of free resources there to support you. Love everything about technology. So if you're a fellow nerd like me, reach out. I'd love to follow you and share and exchange great insights about our industry. Thanks so much, everyone.